Hey, how's it going? Today we're going to build some mix-ready high-gain guitar sounds with the Line 6 HX Stomp. I'm going to be catering towards some kind of lower tunings in this, so I'm using my Fender Bari-Tone conversion strat. We've got a Seymour Duncan SH5 in the bridge here and a quarter pounder in the neck. This is a Warman Texas Special style pickup in the middle, but we won't be using that too much. If you want to hear some of these sounds in action, check out my Bari-Tone build video here. In that video I used just the HX Stomp to complete some of these sounds, and I got some questions on it, so that's why I'm doing this video today. Okay, so I've got my HX Stomp here next to me. For the sake of ease and not having a second camera, I'm going to be using HX Edit here, but obviously this will work just manually putting it in. So first of all, we're going to load up a blank patch. I like to start in the middle of the chain here, in case I need to put anything before or after the amplifier. We'll go with the amp and cab block together. The amp I like best here is, I think it's called Placator, I don't know how you pronounce it. I like the Placator dirty sound. I think it's a model of a Friedman. For the lower tune guitars, I think it gives the kind of most full frequency of sound, and from there we can kind of carve out what frequencies it is that we're actually looking for. But I like to start with something full to begin with. Let's see how it sounds anyway. Even though there's a lot of drive on this, there doesn't seem to be a lot of kind of gain to it. This HBE switch works really well for kind of just filling things out a bit. Kind of tightens up the low end, gives you some top end. It's really nice. What I do is I use the saturation switch here, but the saturation switch also reduces your overall volume and your mid-range, so we'll address that in a second. So we've obviously got more gain going on there, less mid-range, less output. I'm really after bumping up those mids. I'm really after pushing them quite a lot. I want some good strong mid-range going, particularly when we're down tuning, drop tuning. You're going to want some mid-range. You're going to want a lot of it, to be honest, to pull out the actual note frequencies, basically. Give it a bit of presence and kind of saturation go pretty well together. I don't think we need that much gain for riffs anyway. For lead it could be cool, but we don't need too much for what we're doing. Now you hear there's a little bit of resonance at the bass. It's kind of muddying things up a bit, so we're going to just pull a bit of the bass out there. Yeah, so we can actually hear individual notes there, and there's nothing rumbling out of control. There's nothing muddying things up. So we can cut a little bit more. Yeah, I'm happy with how it sounds. Now, you hear that hiss? You might be tempted to pull out a noise gate block and use up one of your precious blocks here. Here's a little hack for the Helix. If you go to this main LR, this is your input section here, we've actually got a noise gate built in here. So all we need to do is turn that on. Now we've got a gate, volume up. And it's gating. Tune the threshold to your liking. Somewhere around here is pretty good for me, somewhere around 61. Anywhere between 60 and 70 is pretty good for me. Perfect. And we've still got all of our other blocks on the chain here free. Cool, so that's sounding pretty good. To be honest with you, I don't ever really use the ripple bias or bias X sounds. I'm sure if I was doing something different, they'd probably come in real handy. Maybe if I was playing live and you're going through a loud, PA system or through a cabinet, things like that. Right now, they don't really bother me. I'm happy enough with that sound, so we'll go with that. The cab section here, you can do a ton in terms of prepping the guitars to be recorded, particularly in kind of these high gain riff sounds. You're going to want to be fairly aggressive with your low pass filters and your high pass filters. We can actually save ourselves some time and CPU power when it comes to the actual mix here. The cab section has a high pass and low pass filter. They call it low cut and high cut. So we can actually carve out any of those frequencies that we'll be taking out anyway. Again, just adding to the whole mix ready, plug and go kind of idea. As well as that, in the cab section, playing around with different mic sounds for your different takes, using one mic on, say, your left channel and a different mic, completely same settings, just a different mic on the right channel. It'll lead to a nice separation and kind of a widening effect in your mix. We'll get to that a little later, but just keep a note of that. Okay, let's stay with that one, but let's go for something like this. I personally love the 421 dynamic setting, so I'm going to use one here. And yeah, I'm going to be kind of aggressive with the low and high cut. I've heard some guys talking about cutting anywhere up to 100 hertz when they're tuning really low at a baritone, G, F, even octave E, whatever it is. I'm in drop A. I'm not going to go that aggressive, but I'm going to go up towards 90 hertz. 87 usually works pretty good for me. I've got a lot of control on those palm mutes there. Cool. And the high cut. A lot of the digital modelers, you'll get that kind of pristine high end that just simply isn't there in a regular amp and cab. And I know I said earlier that we're not really going for a regular amp and cab sound, but we don't want to sound too harsh either. Plini actually referenced this in a Rick Beato video. He'll take the high cut on his Axe effects down to about 6.5K too. And hey, if it's good enough for Plini, it's good enough for me. I like to add in some early reflections. This is basically a room reverb. Again, I'm aware I said we're not doing, the amp in the room sound, but I don't know, it gives a little bit of feel when you just add a little bit of this in. I'll add anywhere around 25%. There's something in the top end that just kind of smooths out a bit. That sounds pretty good to me. I could track with that and I'd be relatively happy with it, but personally I would go and put an EQ after this. Now we've already done a ton of work, but adding an EQ here can kind of let us carve out some of the frequencies we want to take up in the mix. So for instance, my band is instrumental. We don't have vocals, and any of the keyboards we do have are more of a supporting role. So I'm happy to take up a lot of vocal frequencies with the guitar, 1K, 1.5K. So we're gonna add an EQ block here. We'll go with the parametric EQ so we can pull out what frequencies we actually want. We've already done a high and a low cut, but just when we are working with an EQ here, especially if we start adding things, we're gonna start adding gain. And that means adding gain to any frequencies coming into this EQ block. So we'll just add a 40k low cut here, sorry, 40 hertz low cut, and we'll do a 16k cut from the highs. It's normally my starting high and low cut in any EQ plugin when I'm actually mixing guitars. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to hear too much of a difference because, as I say, we've already been pretty aggressive with the cab EQ. Now, the mid frequencies, that's what I'm particularly interested in. So with the baritone, I like to go just below 1000 hertz. I'll just bump it to taste. When you're adding EQ, you're adding gain, so it's could be a good idea to go back and take away some of the drive from the amplifier or some volume. Anything that's kind of adding to the saturation, to the gain of the sound. Just balance it as you go along. Don't keep adding it because you could clip. Digital clipping does not sound good. Guitars in general tend to respond good to a bump around 3 or 4k, so we're going to bump 3k a little bit, just to kind of get in that attack. Cut some boxiness around 500 hertz. Pull that a little bit. Sounds pretty good. We'll pull a little bit more of the drive here, just not to be adding too much. Obviously you can play around with whatever frequencies it is that you want, but to be honest, I'm pretty happy with that. I would definitely track with that. Your mileage may vary. Play around with cabs, play around with mics, different EQ frequencies, but that's generally my approach to it anyways, to get a nice full sound and then target specific frequencies to either boost or to cut out. Mainly the lower frequencies that add to any kind of mud or any of the frequencies that get kind of boxy when we start boosting mids. Just want to be careful once you start stacking tracks left and right, center, whatever. With some boosted mids, you can run into some problems pretty quickly there. I run my Helix in snapshot mode then, so what I'll do is when I'm tracking, I'll have 2 patches, and for each there'll be 3 snapshots. For each of those snapshots, then I'll have like a straight up rhythm sound like what we just did here. Then after that I'll do a crunch sound. I'll just use the exact same blocks and I'll just change the settings and save them to each snapshot. And then for the last one, I'll maybe do a kind of clean sound, or often what I'll do is I'll have a fuzz. When I'm here in the room tracking, I'll just run some fuzz pedals in front of the HX Stomp. I've got a TC Electronic iMaster and a DoD Carcosa fuzz. I run them in parallel and I send them into the highest gain setting on this or on my amps if I'm tracking with the amps, and it just gives this completely blown out over the top fuzz sound. And what I'll do is I'll mix those in. I'll do a multi-track left and right of the riff I'm playing, and I'll lower it really, really, really low. so you'll barely notice it's there, but it fuzzes things out in the top end a little bit. It can be really cool for like a final chorus or for a breakdown, something where you really want to emphasize what you're doing. So I don't know, let's try put in a HM2 here and see what it sounds like. Swedish chainsaw. We don't need so much drive when we've got so much gain going on the amp, so we can just pull the drive a bit. And like any good HM2 will boost. There. That's what I go for when I'm doing something like that. It's just this completely blown out fuzz sound. Obviously your mileage, your taste might vary, but yeah, I find that kind of handy when you are building up a mix. It can kind of add to the drama, add to the tension, and just help the overall composition. So let's put that on snapshot 3. Yeah, let's save this whole thing anyway. It's this patch here. Let's save that. That's snapshot 3. Go back to snapshot 1 and take that off. Snapshot 2, take it off. 3, it's there. Back to 1. Cool. So on 1, this is our first snapshot then. And our third snapshot then with the fuzz. So for our middle snapshot then, we'll just do a kind of a crunch sound. So we'll take off that distortion. On the amp block then, what we might want to do is, if you really want to go for a clean sound, you might want to take off that HBE switch. For kind of a crunchier sound, I would definitely take off the saturation. This, as we discussed before, will open up the mid-range and give you a bit more volume, so we can compensate accordingly. To save this for this particular snapshot, what we need to do is right click and hit snapshots, and then we just select the setting we want, and it recognizes then that we want this setting for this snapshot. We'll do the same with the channel volume, so we're going to need to pull that down. Maybe we want to leave the mid-range a bit looser, so let's see how this sounds. Okay, let's say we're happy with that. So that's going to be our snapshot 2. Save, back to number 1. Obviously you can take the gain down more if you wanted to make it even cleaner. Let's try that. Let's say on our crunchy one we want to put in a reverb, just for the sake of it. Let's make a nice big long reverb. Show up on trails. We'll turn the mix a bit. We don't want it too many phases. Cool. And then for 1, we'll make sure it's off, and we'll definitely make sure it's off in 3. So that could be a patch then that will get you through your you know, your intro, your verse, your chorus, maybe your breakdown, maybe the solo section, whatever. Cool. Now let's say we want to multi-track that. So we're going to pan this guitar hard left, then we're going to do a separate patch that we're going to pan hard right. This is going to make our mix a little whiter sounding. You can, of course, just use this same patch left and right. I've done it before, but just at the moment I'm preferring separating the two slightly. I personally think it leads to a slightly whiter mix. We have saved this patch. Cool. I'm going to save this to the patch below, which is a blank patch. So I'm gonna save it there. Do you want to overwrite? Yes. Cool. And we'll just rename that immediately so we don't get confused. Rhythm 2. We'll go back to our straight riff sound. Now you can play with any number of parameters here to achieve a slightly different sound. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm pretty much just going to tweak the kind of settings that we've already played with the previous patch, adding more or less. So things like, you know, I might change the cab. See how that sounds. Sometimes that can be too drastic as well. You don't want to go too far. It can sound a bit. Let's go with the Uber 30. Do the same as before with the EQ and the early reflections. Let's save that and see how it sounds. So this is our second preset. Sounds pretty hefty. And all I did was I changed the cab to the Uber V30, which has a much more almost nasally sound to it. I changed the mic to a 57 to kind of bring out the treble. If it was anything a bit more mid-rangey, maybe a bit too. You kind of risk running into some boxiness there. So go with the 57. And then this is our first patch. Even if you wanted to make them a little bit more similar, go back to the first one, put it on the Uber 30 sound. And put the 421 mic on it. Same as before. Increase your mids a little bit. I'm actually happier with that Uber 30 cab, to be honest with you. Now, something worth noting as well is in my Bari-Tone video, I ran my tube screamer into the front of my Helix. No drive, 3/4 of the way, volume and tone to taste. That did tighten things up a good bit. It did add a little bit of gain, the typical tube screamer thing. So let's throw one in and see what it sounds like. So screaming radio 8, no gain, all the volume. Yeah, we'll leave the tone there. This should sound a bit richer in terms of gain. Be careful with treble. This is where the kind of boxy mid-range frequencies can come into things. And also your gain, watch your gain when you start adding more things like that. The same with the other preset. Cool, so that's kind of how I go about getting the sounds for like any of my videos so far here on YouTube anyway, and in particular that baritone video. A lot of people were asking me about the sounds that I got on that. All going according to plan. If all goes according to plan, you should be able to get these patches in the description below if I figure out how to share them properly. If you like the sounds, let me know. If you don't like the sounds, let me know. Let me know what I did wrong. If I did anything wrong, let me know what you would have preferred to see. And if you do try out the patches as well, let me know. Let me know what they sound like. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. That'll help me out a good bit. And like the video as well if you liked it. Follow me on all the socials. If you're interested in any of the music I do, I play in a band called Sky Trumpets. You can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, Bandcamp, and here on YouTube too, actually. Thanks for watching.